Hey, welcome back to ZK MasterTech. Have you ever had a problem where on your 8R tractor where you tried to steer it, pretty hard and the steering was hard? Usually whenever you have an SCV engaged, the steering will be hard, but you disengage the SCV and then it steers real easily. Well, that's probably because of your priority valve. And today I'm going to show you how to fix that. On this tractor, we have a priority valve that goes in the hydraulic pump, and a priority valve, just like in the name priority, it prioritizes the oil. So the oil that gets fed first is the steering and the brakes. Those circuits get priority. Then after those circuits are satisfied, then you're able to have the rest of the hydraulics. So whenever your priority valve fails, or maybe the O-rings on the priority valve fails, it doesn't allow that valve to prioritize the oil properly because it's leaking past the seals or the valve isn't working properly. Well, in this 8270R, it steers just fine whenever you don't have an SCV engaged, but as soon as I detent one back, the steering gets super hard. So we're gonna yank out this priority valve and it's probably got blown O-rings. Okay, we're under the tractor here, and here we have our main hydraulic pump. It's on the right-hand side of the center section here, and it's splined in and it goes into a pump drive. And up here, we have our priority valve. So what we're gonna do is, and it's similar on all the different pumps on 8Rs. They have this valve in there, but it might be configured differently just depending on which model you have. But this one right here, we got the priority valve right here, and we're gonna take this hose off, and then we're going to take a large socket. Let me see what size it is. It's 1 7/8 inches. Yeah, that's what fits it. 1 7/8 inch socket, and we're gonna pull this valve out, and we're gonna inspect it and see if it's got any blown O-rings on it. Okay, so I got that valve pulled out, and guess what? We got 2 O-rings that are missing, gone. Here's a new valve. See how we got these O-rings? Now, you can get an O-ring kit for these valves, but any tractors that have, anything over 3,000 hours or so, I just put a whole new complete valve in, just so I don't have any other problems later on down the road. But anyway, so we got to look into this bore where this was and see if we can find any chunks of these O-rings still left in there and try to get them out. And then we'll install this new valve here and his problem should be fixed. But here we got this hole up in here. And I don't know if you guys can see. Hold on a second. Oh, look at that. Yep. So we got to go fishing for some O-ring chunks and pieces and try to get them out of there. Okay, so I got the 2 chunks dug out. One of them fell in the bucket, but I couldn't find this one, so I started digging around with a 90-degree pick in the valleys in there and got that worked up where I could just barely see the tip of it sticking up. So I got my long double jointed needle nose pliers in there and boop, pulled it out. So yeah, sometimes where'd the other piece of that go, but you can't really see down in that hole, and you just got to do the best you can to get out what you can see and what you can pick out. So I got that out, so now I'm gonna shove this new one in, and voila, it's replaced. And I put new O-rings on that fitting, and you always want to change your O-rings on your fittings. Okay, well that was fun and exciting, digging those O-rings out of the hole, but I got her. So now we're gonna start this beast up and see if she behaves herself. Okay. Steers just fine. Now we're gonna engage the SCV. This is when it wouldn't steer. I mean, it was like you lost power steering. Steers just fine. SCV disengaged. I got it on a 9-second timer here. Let's put that back. Oh, that's a lot better. Before you couldn't even steer it at all. Cool. All right, well, this unit's fixed. On to the next one. Who knows what we got to do next? All right, well, what we got to do next is I've been back at the shop, and I got the 8260R tore down that has the idler gear, and the timing gears of the engine was loose. And let me bring you guys in here and show you what I got going on here. So here's the idler gear, and whenever I got the cover off finally, found that this bolt here is broke off in the engine block. So that's good. And it's wallered out this hub, and it wallered out the timing cover a little bit, and that bolt looks like it's broke off flush in the block. And then this bolt that goes through here was loose. I pulled this out with my fingers. Let me show you the block. Here's the cover for the auxiliary drive, and this is where that bolt was rubbing, and this was the only thing keeping that bolt from coming out. And then that gear was starting to rub right here. And here's the engine block. Let's get some light on the situation. Anyway, I had to get, fan drive, the water pump housing, and fan drive support, and I had to pull the vibration dampener off, and those are on there. They go into a taper, but there's Loctite 680 on here, and you have to get the dampener off, and then you have to heat this with a torch. And I got the rosebud out and got it hot, and then I was able to put a puller on it and snap it off. But the first puller I put on there, you just leave the dampener on there, and then you put just M10 bolts in there, and I was stretching the bolts because I wasn't able to heat this and loosen up the Loctite. So there's a different tool to where you can take the dampener off, and then there's just a crank hub here that's just all metal, and then you can heat that and then use a different tool that uses 4 M12 bolts and then get it off. I mean, why is there always a die grinder running in this shop? I mean, why can't guys get a Milwaukee powered die grinder like I got and it's just quiet? Anywho, so this hole here is where that M10 bolt was. And that hole, you can see, is not very happy. So this is the timing cover. And then if you look in there, you can see the timing cover gasket and then the bolt. So, but the crank gear looks like it's gonna live. I mean, it's just slightly scuffed. I don't see any big chunks or anything missing out of it, so I think it's gonna be okay. There, everything on the gears looks okay. We can reuse it. You can see where the gear was rubbing into this timing cover too. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna try to center punch this bolt and just tickle it with a left-handed drill bit and see if it'll just easily turn out of there. If it doesn't easily turn out of there, then I'm gonna take this whole timing cover off to where I can really get in there and really focus on drilling that straight, because I got zero room for error because that's going into the engine block. So say a prayer for me. Well, it's my lucky day, fellers. I went in there, center punched it while I was looking at the hole through a mirror, and when I center punched it, this bolt moved just a little bit. So I just took my automatic centering punch, stuck it in this hole, and just started turning to the left. And this bolt just turned right out of there. So my luck has finally turned with broken bolts. So now we just need to make sure that these threads are good, get them cleaned out. We'll put a new O-ring in this hole here and put a whole new gear assembly on, and we'll be going back together. Okay, so my plan changed a little bit on this. We could not get the correct timing cover and idler gear hub and gear assembly to the new updated parts. So these parts are now obsolete, but I couldn't get the new stuff. So we ended up reusing the gear in the either hub and getting the threads cleaned out real good and torquing new bolts in there. And I think it's going to be fine, get them through the season. We'll probably order all the parts, and later on, maybe this summer, we'll address updating that to the new style. Also couldn't get the fan drives that I wanted, so I went ahead and rebuilt those. I replaced the crank seal. I put a new water pump in that takes a special tool to remove and install that cartridge style water pump in there. Recommend to change those about 3,000 hours. So this one's right there at 3,000 hours, and I was, right there, so I might as well do it. So now I got, this in there torqued in, got the cover back on, new gasket. Now I'm just going to get the crank hub torqued onto there and the dampener on, and then I can start throwing the fan drive and water pump housing support and start hanging fan drives and putting all this back together. But I'm on a time crunch, and we got to get this thing back to the field because the customer needs it now. All right, so we got an update on the 8260R that had the idler gear loose on the front of the engine. All that got done, but the turbo codes ended up coming back, which I figured they were probably going to, because I wanted to put a turbo on it that day, but all we had was the actuator and the position sensor, so I thought I'd try it. But the codes came back, so we're gonna go ahead and put a new VGT turbo on it. But when I got the interstage pipe off, it had a bunch of oil in it, and it's all there. You can see the oil there, but it's all gummed up in there full of oil. So the low pressure fixed turbo is blowing oil into the VGT, so that's great. So thought we were just doing one turbo, but now we're going to be putting both of these turbos on. So here we got the fixed low pressure turbo feeding into our variable geometry turbo. So all this is getting ready to come off. So this is going to be my shop project for now. Luckily, we were able to give the customer a loaner, so they've got a tractor to run, so the pressure's kind of off to try to rush this thing back to them. So we're going to make sure it's getting fixed right, and once I get these turbos on, we'll put this tractor on a dyno and make sure everything is good to go. All right, so I got all the pipes off of both turbos in order to get them pulled. The oil lines, the electrical, all the mount bolts are out except this one. And then I should be able, now I'm going to pull this fixed turbo off, and then I'm going to go to the other side and pull off that VGT. There's one. All right, well, that's one down. You see it just mounted it here with 4 bolts. We had our oil drain. That wouldn't come out of the hole, so I had to take the bolts out, just take it off there. And then here we've got our fuel dosing injector that went into the side of the turbo. So it wasn't too terrible. Just got to get the air pipe, the exhaust pipe off, dosing injector, oil return, oil supply, and 4 bolts, and that baby comes off. Okay, so here we got our VGT. You can see this is the new VGT actuator that I installed, and the position sensor. So sometimes it fixes them, sometimes it doesn't. If those vanes, the variable vanes inside the turbo, are getting stuck or bound up, then it won't move. So it won't go to the proper position that the ECU is wanting it to go, and then I'll set the code, and then I'll derate the engine. So we did everything we could at the time. So now all we got to do is take this one bolt out here, and this turbo is coming out. Now we can get to this bolt a lot easier. Mid torque for the win. I think I'm gonna go around the other side and snag it. Loosen the clamps on this guy to get her a little wiggle there. Your oil pipe stuck too. Of course it is. Finally. All right, got 2 new turbos here, so just got to get them prepped, ready to go, get all my surfaces cleaned up, and new gaskets ready to rock, and then I'll start putting these babies on. Once they're torqued down, then we're gonna prime them with oil real good and make sure the bearings are lubricated in the turbo, and then we'll start hooking up all the pipes and everything else. All right, we're gonna slap the big VGT on first. Of course my dowel come out. There. The oil pipe just went right in the hole. I just can't believe it. Busted out the good old gear wrench, electronic torque wrench here. Haven't used her in a while. There she is, torqued. Somewhere like that. Okay, so I got this just sitting in here for now. I'm gonna get this pipe in here and get the clamp started and just make sure, you know, the angle dangle is right on this, and I'll get the bolts started for my dosing injector and a new gasket in there. Maybe get this clamp kind of started. Just get everything kind of pre-fitted before I torque these bolts down to where I can't move this anymore, because there's a lot of slop in those holes, and if I torqued it down and it was here, and then nothing would line up. So I'm just gonna pre-fit everything before I torque that. So I got this all fitted together, so now I'm going to torque the mount bolts on that turbo, and then I'm going to torque this clamp, and then we'll get the inner stage pipe put on here, and this pipe for the charge air cooler, get that on there. Need a new gasket for that, Then we'll put the air intake on this side down to the air cleaner, and we should be getting close to wrapping this thing up. And then we'll put oil in these holes right here, and we'll prime the bearings up and make sure they're good and lubricated. And this turbine housing is not clocked correctly, so I need to loosen this clamp, rotate this housing, because this pipe needs to be like over here in order for it to line up better. So loosen this clamp, turn this, get that pipe lined up. All right, so I got the turbine housing clocked correctly, got oil in there, and I'm spinning the shafts, getting the bearings pre-lubricated. This pipe will go right on now that I got that all where it needs to be. I went ahead and tightened that clamp. So just got to put this back on and tighten this clamp, and then put my fittings in for my oil supply lines. And then I should be getting, yeah, real close to firing this up, besides putting the air intake pipe on that side. So almost done. All right, well, she's all complete. Everything's where it needs to be. The only thing we're lacking is a hood, obviously, and some side shields, but it is good enough to start this thing up and let it run and do a VGT calibration. All right, so I got this thing fired up yesterday and got the VGT calibrated, and now we're going to get the rest of these heat shields on, get the hood on, and then I'm gonna put this thing on the dyno. We got to run it on the dyno, and at 1048 RPM, it's supposed to be 231 horsepower. We're at 1,120 pounds of torque, but she's just a little shy of what it's supposed to be rated at, so she might be a little tired, but we're going to run her up this load for a while and just make sure everything runs okay with under a load, and that the turbo codes don't come back. Got the power meter pegged. So we're right around that 1050 mark. 1048 is what it's supposed to be rated at. So basically when we put it on the dyno, we run it wide open, and then we crank the resistance of the dyno until the PTO RPM goes to the rated speed, which is 1048 on this tractor. Each tractor is different. We run it down to that 1048, and then we see what the horsepower is and whether it's low or high. So this one's just a little bit under, but you know, she's got original injectors, and, you know, 3,000 some hours on it. So sometimes they can be just a little shy, but most of the time John Deere tractors are underrated. Usually they run more horsepower than what the book says in there, so they're usually pretty strong. Well, she started getting hot on the Dyno Run. She got up to like 220 degrees, and these coolers are pretty plugged up, so I'm gonna blow them out with this special radiator wand. It's got that 90-degree tip on it. And you can get these from Sloan Express, and there's one for water and then there's one for air. And let me tell you what, these things will blow like no other. They clean the coolers really good. So check them out at sloanexpress.com. Well, I finally got all those coolers cleaned out. My goodness, were those things dirty. So I blew them out as good as I could with air with that wand, and then I switched to the one with the water and just cleaned and cleaned and cleaned, and those things were just plugged solid. So I did the best I could, got as clean as we could get it, and then I put it back on the dyno again, and this time it had a little bit more horsepower. You know, when you have the aftercooler all cleaned out and get a little bit more flow. So I ran it for a good 30 minutes under a load, no codes. Everything seemed to be working good. The temperature before I cleaned the coolers was getting up to like 220 degrees and climbing. After I cleaned them out, it was only running 209 as the hottest I could get it. After I took it off the dyno, I drove around the lot, and just driving around the lot, the hottest it would get is like 180 degrees. So definitely made a huge improvement there by cleaning out those coolers. And so that tractor is now on a truck headed back to the farm so we can get our loaner tractor back. So I'm off to the next service call, and you guys will just have to find out and see what it is. Oh, and I forgot to give you guys an update on the 9570 RT that had the after treatment codes, and then I was having the temperature probe and the DPF melted off, and the engine was vibrating. Well, we figured out what was wrong with it. The DPF was so plugged because the SCR system was plugged. The unit had been overdosing DEF into the SCR and had it plugged, and then the DPF plugged so bad that there's literally no flow going through it, and it started just leaking out around the clamps in the exhaust, because it literally had nowhere for the air to go. Because we took the DPF to a shop that specializes in cleaning exhaust filters and stuff like that, and they tried cleaning it for 12 hours, and normally they clean them for 6 to 8. They cleaned this one for 12 hours, and after 12 hours it had zero flow, plus it was cracked too. So we're gonna have to put a new filter in it. The DOC was okay, so we went ahead and took the whole SCR system and sent that to them as well, and they were able to clean it and get it to flow okay. So there's another tech in the shop that's doing all that work to it now, so he's getting it all back together. But he fired that thing up without any exhaust on that 15-liter Cummins, and wow, did that thing have a low grumble. Man, was that thing awesome. Super loud. So, but you know, once the exhaust was unhooked, that engine ran just perfectly fine, didn't have no vibrations. So it's in the works of getting fixed right now, so thought I'd give you guys an update on that tractor. Well, good morning. Welcome back to ZK MasterTech. You know, right now, I'm just spitting on a goldfish trying to keep it alive, and I've officially ran out of spit. So it's been crazy lately. We've had a really good weather window. It's been hot. I've been like French fried for 3-4 days now. Feels like temp, you know, way up in the high 90s, 100 degrees, whatever. Tractors are running as hard as they possibly can to get planting wrapped up, and you know, crap has literally hit the fan this morning, and I'll bring you in and show you what I mean. So we got a big 8360R here, and customer called and said that the fan had went into the radiator, and it did. So basically, our bearings on our fan driven went out and, you know, broke the speed sensor, got super hot, and then the fan, you know, wobbled and went chitty chitty bang bang into the radiator. So it got into the radiator, it got into the aftercooler, the fan's all damaged. Fan shroud's broken, so we're gonna have to put a radiator and aftercooler, fan driven, fan, you know, basically all that stuff that went boom. So right now this morning we're gonna get this thing ready to get put on the trailer so we can haul it back to the ICU. So looks like the customer last night cut the belts and they got it already unhooked from the planter. So now we're just gonna get this thing to where it will run without any further damage, basically, and get this thing hauled back to the shop. The truck has arrived. Morning, Keith. This is our awesome truck driver, Keith. What do you think the plan is of attack?
Well, I would like to sit right there and swing that and pull right on. I'm assuming at this part it's not the owner.
No. All right, so it's gonna, where are you gonna detach the trailer?
Attach it right there.
right here. And we just drive her right on and then head back south. All right, let's make it happen. All right, we got her on the trailer. Just got to chain her down and head her back. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of ZK MasterTech. I appreciate everybody watching. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and keep that green iron moving, and may your wrench never slip. I'll see you guys later.